She never spoke a single word on screen, and yet, in a movie packed with 100-foot monsters smashing cities into rubble, she was the character audiences could not stop watching. A small girl, silent, signing to a giant ape like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her name was Kaylee Hottle. She was 18 years old, and 4 days ago, in the quiet dark of a Maryland backyard, her life ended in a way none of us saw coming. This is not just a story about a car crash, it's a story about a girl who was born into a family that had been deaf for 4 generations, who turned that identity into something the world had generally never seen on a movie screen before, and who, in the span of the 5 short years, became one of the most quietly important young actors in Hollywood. Stay with me till the end because what happened in the hours after her death, the video her mother posted, the reaction from the people like Millie Bobby Brown and Marley Matlin, the way an entire school of the deaf in Texas came together is honestly one of the most moving things I have covered in a long time. Let's talk about who Kaylee Hottle was. Kaylee Hottle was not just a deaf actress playing a deaf character. That distinction matters more than people realize. When she was born in Atlanta, Georgia, into a family where deafness was not an obstacle, it was heritage. Her father's side of the family had been deaf across 4 generations. American Sign Language was not something Kaylee learned as a second language or picked up for a role. It was her first language, her home language, the language she dreamed in. Think about what that means for a moment. Most hearing actors who play deaf characters have to learn ASL from scratch, work with coaches, practice for months to get the sign right. Kaylee never had to learn to be deaf on camera. She simply had to be herself and let the camera catch it. Her first real exposure to the public came young, around age 9, when she appeared in a PSA for a Glide, a video messaging app widely used within the depth of heart of hearing community. It was a small thing, a local moment. Nobody could have predicted it would be the first domino in a chain that led one of the biggest franchises in the modern blockbuster cinema. Because a few years later, casting directors from a little movie called Godzilla vs. Kong were looking for something very specific, a real deaf child actress to play a character named Gia, an orphan girl who is the last known survivor of the lost civilization and who communicates with Kong not through words but through sign language. They did not want an actress pretending to be deaf. They wanted the real thing. They found Kaylee when Godzilla vs. Kong hit theaters in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic when the entire industry was praying people would still show up to cinemas. Something unexpected happened. Audience were not just talking about the monster fights, they were talking about Gia. Here's was the story about two literal titans of destruction, and the emotional center of the film turned out to be a small, deaf, silent girl and a giant ape who could not speak either. Kong and Gia communicated entirely through sign language and gesture, no subtitles needed for the audience to feel it. It was quietly one of the most tender relationships in the entire MonsterVerse. Critics notice, that audience especially notice, for a community that has spent decades watching Hollywood either ignored that characters entirely or hand that role to hearing actors. Kaylee's performance, genuine, unforced, real, landed differently. It was not a gimmick. It was not an inspiration porn, it was just true. She was good enough, and the character resonated deeply enough that when the sequel was greenlit, there was never really a question of recasting. Kaylee returned as Gia in Godzilla Kong, The New Empire in 2024, this time with an even bigger role in the story, walking red carpets in Hollywood as a teenager who had almost by accident become one of the most visible deaf performers in the entire industry. By this time, she was a senior in high school. Kaylee Hottle had appeared in two of the highest grossing monster movies of the decade, and she had done it while remaining enrolled in Texas School of the Deaf in Austin. Not a Hollywood kid pulled out of school for stardom, but a regular student who happened to also be a movie star. That's balance, ordinary teenager, extraordinary opportunities apart. What made her story land so hard when it ended? In the very early hours of Tuesday morning, in a rural stretch of Frederick County, Maryland, a small community called Jamesville, a 1995 Honda Accord was traveling down a two-lane road. Just before 3 a.m., the car went off the road and struck a culvert. Inside were three young people. A 19 years old man was driving. Kaylee was one of two passengers. According to the Frederick County Sheriff's Office, deputies and fire and rescue crews responded to the crash within minutes. The driver suffered injuries that were not considered life threatening. The second passenger declined medical treatment at the scene entirely. Kelly did not walk away. She was rushed to a local trauma center, but according to her father, Joshua Hottle's doctor told him that her heart stopped somewhere along the way to the hospital. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The Maryland Chief Medical Examiner's Office would later confirm her cause of death as multiple blunt force injuries. Investigators believe excessive speed was the contributing factor in the crash. As of now, the incident remains under investigation. She was 18 years old. Her father was in Texas when he got a call. In a video he posted publicly afterward, filmed like everything in his family in American Sign Language. He described talking in his word, a flight he never wanted to take, a flight to Maryland, a flight to go claim his daughter's body. He later spoke for nearly 23 minutes in the live stream, working through the shock in real time in front of a community that had watched his daughter grow up on screen. It's hard to overstate how raw that kind of grief looks when it's expressed entirely in sign. No muffled voice to hide behind, no ability to look away and just listen. Every hand movement, every expression visible and unfiltered. 2 days after the crash, Kaylee's mother, Ketsi Hottle, posted her own video, 4 minutes long, entirely in ASL. She did not post her written statement translated after the fact. She signed it herself directly to a community that would understand every gesture without needing a single word of English. In the captions, she described it's a privilege to have been Kaylee's mother. Alongside the video, she shared an old photo, a throwback selfie of the two of them together at the beach, both smiling, sun on their faces, nothing but an ordinary happy day. She spoke directly to the deaf community in that video, not just mourning privately but reaching out publicly, saying she hoped everyone who had known Kaylee felt as honored to have known her as she did. Her father, in his own post, said it simply, Kaylee's mom and her four siblings are crushed. Four generations of a deaf family, and in one terrible night, a hole was torn straight through the middle of it. The tributes did not stay contained to a deaf community for long. Millie Bobby Brown, who co-starred alongside Kaylee, said she was deeply devastated by the loss. Oscar-winning actress Marlee Matlin, one of the most prominent deaf performers in the Hollywood history, wrote that she was absolutely gutted by the news and hoped Kaylee's beauty and talent would be remembered forever. Troy Kotsur, the Oscar winner from Coda, wrote that Kaylee's death made him think of his own daughter and reminded him not to take time for granted, offering his deepest condolence to the Hottle family. These were not publicists issuing generic statements. These were people from within the same tight night deaf performing community mourning one of their own, a teenager who represented the next generation of exactly the kind of representation they had spent their careers fighting for. Meanwhile, the Texas School for the Deaf and the Austin, where Kelly was a senior, announced her death publicly and confirmed counseling and support service would be made available to her grieving classmates and staff. The school called it a tremendous loss and asked the wider community to hold Kelly's loved one in their thoughts. A GoFundMe was set up to help the family cover funeral costs. It blew past its $20,000 goal within a short time. Strangers, fans, and members of the deaf community all chipping in for a family they had never met because Kaylee's 5 years on screen had made her feel like a family to them too. Here's the part I think gets lost in a lot of corporate stories of like this. Kaylee Hottle was not famous because she overcame being deaf. She was extraordinary because she never had to overcome anything at all. She simply got the exactly who she already was on the biggest screen in the world, and audience fell in love with the honesty of that. For decades, Hollywood's relationship with the deafness on screen had been clumsy at the best. Hiring actors mimicking sign language, deaf character used as symbols rather than people. Kaylee's casting in Godzilla vs. Kong and the fact the studio brought her back for the sequel rather than treating her as one of the novelty was a quiet but real shift, a signal that authentic representations could also be good filmmaking. She did all of that while still being fundamentally a teenager, one who went to a real school and four siblings, took beach trips with her mom, and was, by every account from people who knew her, exactly as warm and genuine off camera as she was on it. That's the tragedy underneath the tragedy. Not just that a rising young star lost her life far too soon, but that a girl who represented an entire community's hope for a different kind of future in the entertainment had that future cut short in a single moment on a dark road before 3 a.m. Kaylee Hottle leaves behind two films that will be watched for decades, a community that saw itself reflected in her for the first time, and a family now left to grieve in a language of hands and silence that somehow says more than words ever could. If her mother tribute told us anything, it's being Kaylee's parent, even for just 18 years, was something she considered as an honor. And for the millions of people who watch a small girl talk to a giant ape and believe every second of it, knowing her even from a distance felt like an honor too. Rest easy, Kaylee.